Hello everyone and welcome to The Point with me, Hala Al-Hamalawi. Today we'll be talking about the National Palestinian Dialogue which concluded in Cairo today after discussing ways to end the inter-Palestinian rifts and disagreements and means of guaranteeing the success of the upcoming legislative elections that was called for by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Actually, the factions issued a final communique where they thanked President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for his support of the dialogue, and they said that they had reviewed with high responsibility the urgent national issues and risks facing the Palestinian cause and the elections, which would be based on previous Palestinian consensus and agreements. To discuss more the importance of the meeting which took place here in Cairo and the final communique that was issued today, as well as Egypt's role in bringing an end to Palestinian rifts, we're very much delighted to have with us today Dr. Cherif AMIR, Professor of International Relations. Thank you very much, Doctor. Very good evening to you.
Thank you.
Doctor, to begin with, how do you see the importance of holding the meetings here in Cairo?
Egypt is regaining again its role in the Middle East after what is called the Arab Spring. We're telling the world again that Egypt, who started the peace process in 1979 of the Camp David Accords, and who sponsored also the Oslo agreements, Egypt, who defended the rights of the Palestinians all these decades, now is gaining again its role. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, from the first day in office, he stressed that this issue is an important issue for the whole Middle East. And I remember when there was this conference, strategic conference in Munich in 2014, I think, and President Sisi attended this conference. The Israeli media highlighted a statement made by President Sisi when he said, when the Palestinian-Israeli conflict will be resolved, then there will be security in the Middle East and maybe in Europe also, because this is the center of all terrorism and all disruptions. When I say terrorism, I mean by that there is forces who worked a lot to disrupt the Palestinian reconciliation. And we all know at a certain time, even Turkey is working right now to make all the obstacles in supporting Hamas against the Palestinian Authority. But I think that Egypt showed great wisdom in dealing with that. Because we all know that, unfortunately, some people in the Hamas used to work against Egypt in national interest. But Egypt and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi drew a red line between the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian people, and the terror movements and the smugglings that took place in Sinai. So I think that now when we are gathering everyone again, this is the same message that President Sisi gave from the beginning, is that there will be no solution except by unity within the Palestinians first, to sit down with the Israelis and then negotiate.
Yes. Actually, the meeting, the two-day meeting, brought together around 15 Palestinian factions, groups, and independent figures. And it coincided with the meetings of 15 Arab foreign ministers here in Egypt, again to discuss the same issue. How do you see that?
Once again, Egypt is the hub of all these negotiations. And I think that the Arab League now, and Egypt is endorsing Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait again to be the head of the Arab League. I think that this is a strong message that some people at a certain time thought that the reconciliation between the Gulf states and Qatar at that time, it means that we have decided not to go on with our demands, 13 demands. Well, what is taking place is showing the contrary, that Egypt is a strong country. Egypt is sponsoring the Arab issues, whether in Syria, whether in Iraq, whether in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority. So we're giving the message again that the Arab nations, if they want to gather, they come to Egypt. Egypt is still the stronghold, not only in security issues and military issues, also in peace and diplomacy. And I read 2 days ago in an outlet, media outlet, which is hostile to Egypt. And they said in English that Egypt is abandoning the Palestinian cause. And I said, as an analysis, my analysis, that means that Egypt is doing great. Because some forces do not wish to see us acting like that, whether Iran, whether Turkey. They want to see us put aside, as they have worked against us in 2011.
The stalemates in the Palestinian cause serves their own interests. And this brings me to my next question. Do you expect Hamas and Fatah to put all the disagreements aside and start working together in order to sit on the negotiating table with the Israelis? Should we even expect one Palestinian delegation representing the Palestinians in international forums?
It will take time and effort. And I think Egypt and our intelligence service and General Abbas Kamel made a great effort in that. But still, as I said, there are finances coming from hostile countries who do not wish to see Egypt influencing all this issue. But I think, let's see the whole picture. President Sisi had meetings with His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan, because we know the influence of Jordan on the West Bank, and also it has a huge Palestinian majority in the population there. Yes. We're working with our friends, our brothers in Iraq also. So that means, and let's not forget that when the Gulf states, especially the Emirates, signed the peace accords, what happened? It was for the benefit of the Palestinians. The expansion of the settlements were halted. Yes. And the Israelis decided to stop some of the constructions. So the whole picture shows that the balance is for the camp of peace, of dialogue, of unity between the Palestinians. And I think that now Iran and Turkey, I don't see their influence really in this issue, especially that now Qatar, who was financing as an Arab country, is trying to show good signs. Yes. So we hope there will be one delegation.
Okay. And we have with us now over the phone His Excellency Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Secretary General of the Arab Investors Union. Excellency Ambassador Bayoumi, thank you very much for being with us. And today we're talking about inter-Palestinian reconciliation. Perhaps the Palestinian factions have issued a final communique today in Cairo. Your take in this regard, and how do you see Egypt's role in bringing inter-Palestinian reconciliation?
Very important effort, and we have to encourage it. And I think Egypt is the most able country to do this job, because we are accessible face for all the parties, whether in Palestine or in any Arab country. It is very important to know. And we have a big problem with the Palestinian question within the Palestinians themselves. Because our opponents would tell you that we do not have a Palestinian leadership who can sign peace agreement. So Hamas should reconsider its position. And I am afraid to tell you that Hamas was seeking to establish a very small Islamic emirate in Gaza. This wouldn't solve the Palestinian problem. This wouldn't serve the Islam at all. So this is the role of Egypt in order to make the Palestinians elect one sole leadership, and this will convince the world that we are keen to establish peace on the Arab initiative, which was Land for Peace.
Yes.
Now Israel is in the same problem, because it is a divided country.
Yes.
We have never seen one party in Israel since 1948 ruling, because it has never elected one party by more than 50%. It's always minority against minority. And now we have a prime minister who is under suspicious, and his alliance are very far to the right. We have a new American administration, and today or yesterday there was a positive declaration from the foreign minister of the United States that the United States will continue to support the two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian problem. This is another good development. So let us wait and see, and from my humble opinion, that we have all the time to win this battle.
Yes.
How? Because it's simple. Even the friends of Israel would tell you that the two-state solution is the only way to keep Israel in safe, because one state in years to come will have Palestinians outnumber the Israelis, and this is not what Israel is trying to seek. Another dimension, imagine with me the future of Israel after 20 or 30 years from now, where they are establishing enemies around them everywhere. Who will accept this? Especially with the occupation of the Golan Heights of Syria. Syria is a big country and a big army. Also Syria now is occupied in its internal problems, but for how long this will remain? So I think that the quite diplomacy of Egypt will win at the end. I just hope that Palestinians will make their position unified as much as they can. Then we can go everywhere. And mind you also that the whole world community is voting with us. Take the problem of sending the American embassy to Jerusalem. There were 149 votes in the United Nations General Assembly against this move. Not a country supported except United States and Israel itself and one Latin America country. So we have a good place. We have all the world around us. Lately, Africa also is supporting the Palestinian question and refusing what Israel is doing against what somebody is telling you that Israel is penetrating Gaza. This is not true at all. So we have a very strong position legally and on the ground. So this may encourage all the Palestinian sections to come to reason and to accept one leadership and one opinion in order to solve their Palestinian cause.
Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Secretary General of the Arab Investors Union. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for being with us tonight. And back again to you, Dr. Cherif. Now, in their final communique, the Palestinian factions said that they had reviewed with high responsibility the urgent national issues and risks facing the Palestinian cause and the elections, which would be based on previous Palestinian consensus and agreements. How do you read the statement?
Well, it's a strong commitment, and I think it's respect for Egypt's role. But as I said before, it has to be followed with action and mediation. And I think these are the basis, the good basis, because before there were exchanging accusations.
Yes.
So we have made steps forward.
A good start, like Ambassador Bayoumi said.
Of course. And let me tell you something also. The circumstances in the Middle East now with the Biden administration is giving the Palestinians a new start, if we can say that. Look, for example, the Biden administration started today is hesitating from recognizing the Golan Heights.
And the Golan Heights, yes. But again, the stance towards Iran is shifting. But
of course,
it's like an expectation that the new administration, the new U.S. administration, would take different stance than the previous one of Donald Trump?
Look, the Iranians lost a lot by the assassination of Hassan Zada, which was the head of the atomic energy there, and the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani. So I think that Iran now, if they will go to negotiations, not Iran that was before at the Obama administration, it's much, much weaker. And then let's not forget that, let's say it, that there's peace now between the Gulf states, even in Sudan and Israel. So there is a new era. The Netanyahu administration now is facing March elections. Prime Minister Benjamin
amid
Netanyahu,
corruption allegations,
of course,
to Israeli Prime Minister.
Of course, and he's seeking to exchange visits with Egypt, with Morocco, but he's in a deadlock now because the two-state solution is being brought to the light again. So I think that the Palestinians, they have to see that there is new signs for them that could push them forward to regain some gains that they lost. Of course, the question of Jerusalem now is being very complicated. But let's wait and see what the negotiations could lead for. But let's say again, the unity between the Palestinians is the base. If there will not be no unity, everything will be lost.
Dr. Cherif, allow me to read out the main points of the final communique issued by the Palestinian factions here in Cairo. They said, of course, they agreed that the national partnership is a complete path that begins with the elections for the Legislative Council, the first stage of the National Council elections. 2, adherence to the timetable set by the decree of the legislative and presidential elections, with an emphasis on holding them in Jerusalem, the West Bank and Gaza Strip without exception, and a committee to respect and accept the results. Number 3, the emphasis on supporting the central elections and working to overcome any obstacles that they face in order to be able to carry out their tasks. Number 4, the election cases court is formed by consensus of judges from Jerusalem, the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And this court is exclusively responsible for the follow-up of everything related to the electoral process, its results, and any issues arising from it. Number 5, releasing public freedoms and spreading the atmosphere of political freedom and the release of detainees on a factional background or for reasons related to freedom of opinion. And number 6, to ensure the impartiality of security services in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and that they do not interfere in elections or propaganda for any political party. Dr. Cherif, how do you read the communique?
It's very optimistic, if I can say so, because it sees that there is still opportunity to regain some of the lost land again. I think that the Palestinians, they have a new, let's say, new language when they discuss between them. It's not accusations anymore. There is common basis about Jerusalem, about Gaza, about the detainees. So I think these are the issues that were brought between the Israelis and the Palestinians in 1993, also accords. So I think that this is a new start again. It's the right start. I'm very happy that they are not exchanging any accusations between Gaza and the authority of Gaza and the authority of Ramallah. And I think that this means that, I hope, that the Hamas is recognizing the authority of President Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen as the legitimate authority, of course. And let me say something. I think that I can read between the lines that they need the sponsorship.
I do care about what's between the lines.
Yeah, of course, that's essential. So
that's the analysis here.
Is that there will be a regional power that will lead all that, which is Egypt. Nothing of all these words will be brought to light except by the efforts of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Egypt's role. So I think that they are showing that, okay, we are ready for a new start and we need help and we need the big brother, which is Egypt. And this is the message that we gave to the Palestinians since the issue started in 1948. So I think that now this means that Egypt will have a strong role again, because this was made in Egypt. It wasn't made in anywhere else. The statement
A huge
of
significance for that.
in Cairo, of course. And this means that now, if the Biden administration would like to host any peace initiative,
It will be here in Egypt.
of course, and the main mediator would be President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And I think that for the first time, the Palestinians will recognize that Egypt now is the only power guaranteeing their rights. The Gulf states will make huge investments if they will, they wish to see, not only Qatar. So let's not forget two main factors, Iran and Turkey, and I think that Palestinians, they have to make the choice.
But do you expect Hamas to make some sort of compromises in the upcoming period or not?
Frankly, I don't believe that Hamas would change its position, because Hamas has its own course of dealing with the issue. They have, I don't know how to call it, but they had bad relations with the Palestinian Authority and with Egypt and with Jordan. So, and they reach out to other countries like Turkey, like Qatar, like Iran, and there is the Jihad Islami inside, which is different from Hamas, following Iran. They have to clean the
All this
arena,
mess.
of course, and it will take time. And let's not forget money. Hamas is based upon finance.
Yes.
So they will fight for their, not principles, but for their source of finance.
Yes. What would be the impact of an inter-Palestinian reconciliation if everything goes as planned and the elections go smoothly? How would that affect the Palestinian people themselves?
They will regain confidence in their leadership, because I think that the Palestinians at a certain time, they lost hope, and they saw that that's why we have seen that settlements were growing and the Palestinians were just staying in Ramallah and Gaza, and everything is quiet. Jerusalem was declared the capital of Israel, and then we have seen that no one reacted, even within the Palestinians. I think they had disappointment. They at a certain moment, they saw that they were abandoned by the international community, by the regional forces, and they saw that they had only one choice, which is an intifada. And I think they were really exhausted and tired of getting into a new bloodshed. So I think that this will give them new spirit, will give them new, I think, new leadership within, like Mohammed Dahlan, for example, within the Palestinian Authority. I think that we will see new charismatic leaders that could use this opportunity to tell the people, the Palestinians, you can work again on your issue and start peace again.
Your expectations for the upcoming elections, Dr. Cherif. Now, a lot of talk about the elections, and this is to the Palestinian factions, the cornerstone for the inter-Palestinian reconciliation. What are your expectations for the elections?
My expectation is that there will be a majority of the Palestinian Authority, of Fatah, but Hamas has a presence, and they have Gaza under their control. So I think they will share power at a certain time, and this will be the main issue, because the Hamas would ask for guarantees that they will be spared from any prosecutions. They will ask that they will be out of the assassination list from the Israelis. So they will ask favors for themselves. And I think maybe with the negotiations, Egypt negotiations with Israel, negotiations with the Palestinian Authority, maybe that Hamas will understand that they have to forget their ambitions for working for other countries and work for the Palestinian issue.
We have just mentioned the new U.S. administration under President Joe Biden and how expectations are for a different approach towards the Middle East issues, towards Iran, towards the Palestinian cause, towards Jordan, towards all the regional issues. But when it comes to the Palestinian cause, because as you mentioned, former U.S. President Donald Trump announced Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and there was almost no reaction to this. How do you expect the new U.S. administration of President Joe Biden to deal with the Palestinian issue?
I think that it will depend upon the relationship between Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. If the camp of Benjamin Netanyahu will be in power, I think this will be in favor of the Palestinians. You know why?
So the March elections will determine the approach?
Of course, because if the Netanyahu government will go on, that means that the relations won't be really nice between Washington and Israel and Tel Aviv. So I think that we are heading towards a new era in the Israeli politics in March. And this will determine lots of things. And I think if there will be a national government, national unity government in Israel, maybe yes, peace negotiations will start. If there will, the Netanyahu government will continue, that means that Joe Biden and the administration will have hard time in pushing peace.
But recently the US Senate agreed almost unanimously that Jerusalem stays as the capital of Israel. How would that reflect on the negotiations?
Of course, well, we have to understand the US politics. We all understand that many of the responsibles, the officials there, they are sympathizers of Israel, and they don't hide it. So we have to accept that. We have to understand that. Egypt, even and the Camp David Accords in 1979, it was the main problem that when Henry Kissinger was president, he was even pro-Israel at the negotiations. So we have to accept that, and we have to accept that the Congress will never abandon this treasure for Israel, which is Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. So I think that it won't have real impact, because maybe Jerusalem would be brought as the last file. We don't know about the religious parts. We know, for example, that the Aqsa Mosque is under the control of Jordan, and we all know that it has a special status. So concerning Jerusalem, it won't have real impact, because we have to talk about the settlements first. We have to talk about the detainees first. We have to talk about the national aid for the Palestinians.
Okay, this is very important, the aid for the Palestinians, because there are again expectations that US President Joe Biden will bring back aid to the Palestinians, the Palestinian refugees through the UNRWA.
Nice.
Would that change the game in this conflict?
Yes, it will change, because the Palestinians at a certain moment started to feel that they are recognized, and people outside this region know that they need help. So this was boosting their ambition to ask more for negotiations, for peace. The disappointment that I just mentioned, it was because everyone cut the money at a certain time, and only Hamas was getting money from Turkey and Iran and Qatar. So this was the main problem. I think that the moment there will be an international aid for the moderate camp, let's call it like that, the Palestinian Authority camp, this will give it more strength to the Palestinians. They will see themselves recognized. They will feel that they have a role towards this issue. They will go to elections to vote, because let's not forget, the point is not making elections. The point is pushing the people to go to the ballots and vote, because abstention could kill the whole issue. Yes. If the people are disappointed, they won't go and vote.
And they are. But now
Yes.
we're trying to change that.
Exactly,
Attempts to change that.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. The international aid will create new jobs for them. The UNRWA created schools, jobs, hospitals. People were working. So I think that the new aid will give them a new ambition. This will help, and this will make Israel very cautious in creating new settlements, because there is a population that being prosperous, getting money, having investments in their territories. For example, a city like Bethlehem, unfortunately with the COVID-19 and all the restrictions, it was it was closed this year, but usually it could be a center of investment for tourism there. So the Palestinians know now that with the international aid, they could start a new plan to be an institution that will sit on the table and negotiate with the Israelis.
Okay. And how do you see Egypt's role in alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza Strip? Now, Egypt has announced the opening of the Rafah border crossing. How do you see that step?
Unfortunately, for a long time, some media, for example, like Al Jazeera, etc., they used to say that, allege, which is a huge lie, that Egypt closed the borders and people were starving and dying. That's not true. The Rafah crossing was always open for the elderly people, students, those who need humanitarian aid. It was always, even in the darkest moments of terrorism, Egypt separated between, and this is what we are very proud of our military, because we always separate between the humanitarian action and the military action. So we were defending our borders, yes. We are destroying the tunnels, yes. Stopping smugglers, yes. Fighting terrorism.
That's national security. It has nothing to do with...
This is international law. This is our right. And we were doing a great job. But when there is elderly people and humanitarian cases, we open the borders. And now we will open again, because we see that if the people of Gaza will see that countries like Egypt offering help, they will understand that some factions were telling them lies about Egypt. Egypt is opening its arms for them, helping them, and we're telling them that the moderate way is the only way.
Also, Egypt is sending humanitarian aid to the Palestinians,
yes.
in addition to, of course, opening the Rafah crossing. It is receiving Palestinian patients to be treated in Egyptian hospitals. All this is part of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's keenness to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians.
And students, and Palestinian
students. We cannot forget that.
Yes. So we didn't ban them from anything. So I think that at a certain time, unfortunately, some international media were trying to portray Egypt as making or applying a plan to starve the Gaza people. No, that's not true.
Do you think that in the upcoming period there will be projects in the Palestinian territories and perhaps cooperation with Egypt in this regards, and making use of the Egyptian expertise in this regard?
Of course, we are now a producer of electricity, for example. And at a certain time, we started a project helping Lebanon. And I think that we will do the same with the Palestinians. And the Palestinians, I think they need Egypt's expertise in this case. There will be projects, of course. We had all our expertise now in Africa, for example, in Tanzania, in Congo. So we can help elsewhere. We can help the Palestinians. Even I heard about some seaports they wanted to create. We will help them doing all that. But it has to be according to our national security also.
Of course, yes.
Because this is a sensitive issue. And the Palestinians know that. So national security of Egypt is our priority. We will never, never relinquish that. And the second thing is helping the Palestinians.
And as we mentioned, the meeting of the Palestinian factions here in Cairo coincided with the meetings of Arab foreign ministers.
Yes.
What is the role of Arab countries, Arab governments in supporting the Palestinians in the upcoming stage on the ground? Talking about investments, talking about the political level, the economic level, how do you see the role of Arab countries, especially the GCC countries, the GCC countries in particular, in offering aid and assistance to the Palestinians?
It will help a lot, of course. I think that the Emirates, they wanted to start many of the projects, and they were diabolizing the Emirates at the beginning. I mean by that Turkey and other countries, because they didn't want to see the Emirates investing in this region. So I think that this money will help a lot. It will create jobs for the Palestinians. Let's not forget that one of the most dramatic events in the national history of the Palestinians was unemployment.
Yes.
And the young people were recruited for some actions that will never help the Palestinian issue. So I think creating jobs, projects, this will help a lot. And as I said, when Israel will see that there is a prosperous nation just beside them, it will help a lot, because they will say, well, we have to negotiate. These are not just unemployed population. They are working, they have investors. And the commerce between, maybe the commerce between the Israelis and the Palestinians will be prosperous and will help.
Actually, when the Palestinian factions sat yesterday and today to discuss ending their rifts, they discussed or focused on the upcoming legislative elections. That was the main focus. Do you think that after, or if the elections go smoothly, what would be next to be discussed between the Palestinian factions? How would they discuss all their disagreements in order to share the power in Palestine?
I think that the first issue will be demilitarizing or disarming some factions. And I mean by that the Jihad Islami, Hamas. And this will be, it will be like
this will be difficult.
Like in Lebanon with the Hezbollah. It will be the same. It will be very difficult, because it's even the former foreign minister of Israel, Tzipor Livni, said it, that one of the main problems that Israel will have in any negotiations is about the arms of Hamas, what we're going to do about it. So even Israel is bringing this now up. So I think that this will be the issue between both factions. The arsenal, the military arsenal of Hamas, of the jihad, the rockets. Who will convince them to disarm? This will be a huge issue. The second issue between the ministerial cabinets, how they will have the ministerial cabinets. The third issue is creating one delegation to negotiate with Israel.
That's it.
So these are main issues, but I'm telling you, the most important is disarming the factions.
It's the toughest as well.
Of course, and I'm not...
Because choosing a delegation even would be easier to choose a delegation from both factions, or a delegation representing all the factions to sit down with the negotiating table.
Also.
Still, that would be difficult, because Hamas rejects the idea of negotiating with Israel in the first place. So
yes.
That's among the many challenges.
Although Hamas had secret talks.
But officially they reject.
No, yes, of course. Officially they reject.
They reject negotiations with Israelis.
Yes, but they could be like the opposition parties in Israel. Israel has opposition parties who refuse the Palestinians at all, and they are members of the cabinet, but they are minorities. So could they have 2 or 3 ministers, and the others are pro-peace? But I'm talking again about disarming.
My final question to you, Dr. Cherif, now, until the legislative elections are held, what are your expectations for the upcoming period? What is going to happen between the Palestinian factions? How are they going to lobby for the elections, and how are they going to agree on the number of seats for each faction in the elections, council elections?
Well, I think it would be similar to the case of Libya I mean, by that they will come to Egypt, and it will be the mediation of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to settle this issue with our Arab brothers also. I think that this could be solved with financial aid to some factions, because some factions, let's say it clear, they will say, well, after the elections, what we're going to do? It was our business. Now we're ruining our business. So maybe some money would be given to some factions and tell them, well, you could have your finances, but we have to go on with the process. So this would be, it won't be tough like the disarming, but it will take an effort from Egypt. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, he knows very well that there are key personalities within the Palestinian Authority that we could talk with. The problem is Hamas also. There are people in the Palestinian Authority that we could talk with, we could negotiate whether the factions of the Liberation Front, Palestinian Liberation Front or Fatah, but once again the problem is Hamas. How we negotiate with these people, I think time will tell.
We'll keep our fingers crossed for now.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you very much, Dr.
you.
Cherif AMIR, Professor of International Relations. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining this edition of To The Point. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Many thanks for being with us.